You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. A new statewide survey is giving us a look at where Kansans stand on government, the economy, and more. Today, Kansas Speaks. We're breaking down the results of the new poll with senior State House reporter for the Kansas Reflector, Tim Carpenter, and political analyst, Bob Beatty. Bob, Tim, let's start with where Kansans stand on the people governing them. First up, Governor Laura Kelly. Now, this survey was conducted by the Docking Institute of Public Affairs at Fort Hays State University. It shows that 38.4% of the people that took the survey were satisfied with the performance of Governor Laura Kelly, and 32.9% were dissatisfied. The governor's approval rating is down from 2022's results, where about 50% of Kansans approved. Her approval rating still higher than President Biden's, though, with 21.9% of people satisfied with Biden and 62.8% dissatisfied. Now, when it comes to the Kansas legislature, 23.3% of people were satisfied with lawmakers and 35.1% were dissatisfied. Their approval rating is also down from 2022, where 31.3% of people were satisfied with lawmakers. Now, what do we think about these results? Bob, let's start with you.
Yeah, first I want to say that, I'm a nerd, political nerd. I'm always happy to get polls. This poll is a little bit more difficult to read, and for a very simple reason is that the pollsters asked Kansans, if they approved of their legislators and other questions, but they allowed them to say neutral. And that's a little bit like it's almost worse than punting in football. You're not going backwards or forwards with that one. So there's a bit of an out here. I think viewers will notice that only 60% said satisfied or dissatisfied. That meant 30% either said they didn't know or were neutral on Governor Laura Kelly. So we're still going to look at these numbers, but a lot of polls don't give that neutral option. That being said, this same poll was given a year ago, and at that point, as you mentioned, Governor Laura Kelly was at 50% approval. And the question is, what's happened? Tim will chime in with this as well. I think one key factor was a year ago, Laura Kelly was on the television pretty much every day, 10 times a day, saying she was middle of the road. She was running for re-election. And a lot of positive TV ads were out. So people were seeing her all the time. I think that helped get people to know her. The second thing is this poll asked not registered voters. They surveyed all Kansans, and there's some interesting statistics in there because almost 50% of young people, 18 to 34, surveyed on the Laura Kelly question said neutral or don't know, meaning that I don't think they're that connected to politics. So has Laura Kelly's numbers gone down? Yes, and we'll get into more why we think that's the case, but maybe not as much on the face of it as we might think.
Now, Tim, what's your take?
So I think Bob's right that Laura Kelly's not on TV smashing her over the head with a bunch of positive ads at this juncture. So those numbers are going to slip. But remember, she's above water. There are people, I believe she's above water, and Senator Marshall and Senator Moran are distinctly underwater. There are more people that dislike their performance than like it. And I think maybe part of that is the further you get away from Topeka and Kansas, the more people dislike politicians. Like Biden is supremely unpopular. He's even more unpopular than he was a year ago, more unpopular than when he lost the state badly to Donald Trump. And so I think people don't like D.C., but to some extent they like their own people a little bit better than they like the institution in Washington in general.
All right, and next up, the people representing Kansas in D.C. So we have results for U.S. Senator Roger Marshall and U.S. Senator Jerry Moran. The approval rating for both senators dropped double digits between last year and now. For Marshall, 20.8% of people say they're satisfied. That's compared to 36% who were satisfied with Marshall in 2022. Then Moran, 23.9% of survey takers say they're satisfied with him this year. That's down from 40.9% who were satisfied with Moran in 2022. Now, are people just not happy with politicians this year, or has something changed? Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think your question answers the question. I mean, just the last couple weeks of what's been going on in Washington, D.C., this is not normal. We hear that word unprecedented. So think about what we're seeing in American national politics in in the last month or so when this survey was being taken. In the U.S. House of Representatives, the majority party cannot choose a Speaker of the House. I mean, they eventually got one, but that's dysfunctional. Number two, a former President of the United States, who is the current leader for the nomination of one of the major parties, is sitting in court. So I almost say, can you blame a large swath of these respondents to this poll to say, you know what, maybe you're doing a great job, Jerry Moran, but right now, I just can't say I'm satisfied because you're part of that. I really think that's a huge role.
Bob, you hit on it earlier. You cannot forget the fact that both Jerry Moran, Roger Marshall easily won election to the United States Senate. And it must be said again that they won elections, and this poll is deemed to represent Kansans as a whole. And 30% of the people in this poll didn't vote in the Kelly race, governor's race.
Yes, that's right.
So you're having the voice of an extra 30% into this poll that weren't involved potentially in those U.S. Senate races. And so I just think it gives a little bit of distortion. It does suggest that the people that vote might be more aligned with those two Republican senators, and there's a bunch of people out there who don't vote that maybe are less inclined to vote for them.
That's a really good point. And when we look into some issues, later in the program, in some issues we're going to see fewer numbers who are saying neutral and don't know. So on issues, you're right. Some of these people that didn't vote are still intrigued or they're willing to give an opinion on the issues. But when they get hit with their leaders and they're not voting, they're punting, as you pointed out. And what that means, though, I'm not so sure that's so good for democracy, Tim, right? When you think about it, if these people aren't voting, but someone who's not popular among all Kansas adults still cruises to re-election, that may even lead to even more sort of disaffection with American politics.
It is astonishing that in this poll, 9.9%, I think, is the number of people felt like the Congress was doing a good job. 9%. You could send a bunch of junior high kids up there and they're going to get better than 9.9 just because they tried.
I thought you were meaning that was actually high.
No. When your negatives are in the 60% margin, you maybe need to look for another career.
Well, the survey also has feedback on elections. What are one of the key takeaways for you, Bob?
I think my big takeaway is that around over 50% of the respondents to this poll seem to have some faith in elections, whether they're drop boxes or mail-in votes, or they're confident in the vote count. However, we see those numbers go down a bit when it gets into the specifics of like drop boxes and vote by mail. And I think that's really because there's one major political party that is still casting aspersions on those ways of voting. And because that one party continues to do it, not as much as before. For example, Donald Trump is now saying, oh, maybe mail-in voting's okay. I think if one party stops attacking those methods, we might see those numbers go up.
Tim?
Just to put a little bit of finer point on it, ballot drop boxes, favored by 41% of those polled. No was 29%. Mail-in balloting, 47% won it. Advanced voting, 49% won of it. You have a lot of people that want to take advantage of these more convenient ways to vote than dislike that by a wide margin. So it seems a little odd that you would have this kind of result and you would have people in the State House saying that drop boxes are a threat to democracy.
Well, it's also interesting because this is a Kansas poll, and Kansas elections run by a Republican Secretary of State are the most, I guess, cleanest is the word, elections of the entire country. In fact, Kansas Secretary of State is now the president of the National Secretary of State's Association. So I think he's pretty highly respected. And yet, that national effect, and you said even in the State House, of casting aspersions on voting methods does seem to trickle down.
The Secretary of State Schwab has to push back on some of these legislative initiatives because they're going to hamper his ability to do his job.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, Bob, thank you. Now we're talking about the economy when we come back. Is Kansas on the right track? We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
At Cox Mobile, we know that every family has different needs. That's why the more gig unlimited lines you add, the more everyone saves. Well, almost everyone. Now, when you switch to Cox Mobile, you'll pay as low as $30 per line when you add 4 or more gig unlimited lines. And it's all on the network with unbeatable 5G reliability. With no annual contract. Visit us today to get started. And bring the crew, too.
Devon James wins.
We're Devon James. As lawyers who focus on serious injuries, we know what really matters.
We've helped people get life-saving care after sudden accidents.
We've been there to restore hope during long recoveries.
And fought to provide a better future to those who need it most.
That's why at Devon James, we fight for everything you deserve.
And we will win your case, or you pay us nothing.
Devon James wins. Call 888-8888.
That's my neighbor Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, John.
Joe's about to make a big mistake. Hey, Joe, think it might be a good idea to call 811 to have the utilities marked before you start digging?
I'm not digging very deep. It's no big deal.
No big deal.
Dad, the TV's out. Internet, too.
Remember, safe digging always starts with a free call to 811. Oh, what a knucklehead.
No mo FOMO. No more fear of missing out. The Topeka Symphony Orchestra presents Space Explorer. Get off your couch and experience the Topeka Symphony on November 4th at White Concert Hall.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung here with political experts Bob Beatty and Tim Carpenter. Our next topic, where Kansans stand on the economy. Bob, Tim, it's been rough over the past couple of years, to say the least, with inflation rising at grocery and gas prices. So no surprise here. But the feedback on the economy isn't the best. Now, 18.8% of people that took this survey say that they felt the state economy is very good or excellent this year. This is slightly higher than in 2022, which was 16.1%, but still lower than in 2021, which was 20.8%. Now, 20.5% felt the economy is poor or very poor. This is much higher than in 2021 and 2022. 18.7% of people felt that the Kansas economy was getting better in the last 12 months, which is lower than 2021. At 2021, that was 24.5%. Now, 33.7% felt that it stayed the same. 40.5% felt it was getting worse, down from 43.7% in 2022, but still higher than 2021. And 46.3% of respondents felt Kansas is on the right track, and 30% felt that Kansas is on the wrong track this year. The rating was less positive than the previous 2 years. Now, we've seen a push from the governor to make the economy a big focus of her administration, but still the feedback we're getting on the economy isn't great. So why is that, Bob?
Well, I think one word is inflation. And there's a reason that governments throughout history and U.S. presidents just despise inflation, because politically it's just disastrous for governments and politicians. So when you look at the Kansas economy, unemployment is on record lows. People can get jobs, they can work. And so for the past few years, when people said, oh, the economy's awful, they were thinking about not being able to get a job. Now you can get a job. Wages have gone up, maybe not as high as people would want, but inflation is just depressing to people, and it has this massive psychological effect. And so I think it's very frustrating to people to almost want to say the economy is very good. Hey, I've got a job, I'm making pretty decent money, but dang, look at the prices of everything.
I think maybe worm into that point a little bit. People expected maybe to come out of COVID and you would flip the light switch on post-COVID and the economy would go back to normal, but it just didn't happen. And it may never be the same. And so I think part of this is expectations. People had real expectations of a stable economy, the normal life that I used to have, and the jobs availability and so forth. And they're not seeing in Kansas that Laura Kelly has brought in billions and billions of dollars of investment. And she's dealing with that inflation thing, but there's some good economic news that I think is being ignored.
Bob, Tim, thank you. After the break, we're hearing about where Kansans stand on public policies. That includes marijuana. We see a push every year. Will the people's voice move the needle, or will Kansas lawmakers stay in the weeds? We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
For everyone from players to parents, football offers unlimited growth with even more to learn. Visit futureforfootball.com to get ahead of the game. Find out where to play, what equipment to use, and get the latest from leagues around the country, including pro tips and parental info from the experts. These resources make it easier than ever to create your plan and make your play.
This job. You got pretty personal and very vulnerable.
I just wanted to be honest.
Hey! Here's the wrap.
Oh, this feels so good.
My show is fun. We have puppies.
Weekdays at 3 on 27 KSNT.
This is a fish. A clownfish, actually. He lives in a reef like this. In an ocean like this. This ocean contains these currents. These currents help carry fishing boats like these. Fishing boats like these bring their catch to port. Their catch is loaded onto this truck and delivered to this restaurant. This restaurant serves dinner to this family. This family drives back to their home. Their home borders this forest. This forest surrounds this creek. This creek trickles into this river down to these mangroves. These mangroves buffer the coastline from this bay. This bay is a hunting ground for this shark. This shark swims out to this ocean. This ocean flows over this reef. This reef is home to this fish. This is a fish. A clownfish, actually.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're digging into the latest results of the Kansas Speak survey. I'm here with political experts who are weighing in. Now, Bob, Tim, we're shifting now to where Kansans stand on public policies. Let's take a look at the two M's, marijuana and Medicaid. Now, on marijuana, here's where Kansans stand. 67.2% of people that took the survey support legalizing recreational marijuana for individuals 21 and older to allow state taxation. 16.9% are opposed. 63.6% of people are highly or somewhat likely to vote for a candidate who supported medical marijuana legalization as they decided who to vote for in the Kansas legislature. Now, could these survey results help move the needle on marijuana next year? Tim, based on what you're seeing in the legislature, what do you think?
Do you want me to start with marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. So I think what you have are very strong views among Kansans about this issue. I think 48% of the people surveyed said they had very strong views about legalizing marijuana. And Kansas is surrounded by a bunch of states that do it, but there's just this political roadblock in the State House that keeps the Republicans in the House and Senate from adopting a bill. Laura Kelly said that she would definitely sign a medical marijuana bill. She's a little iffy on recreational weed.
All right, Bob, what's your take? Is marijuana a go next year?
Well, you know, I want to take a side on whether it should or should not, but I'll say it should, given the survey results and given the continuous survey results, if we're living in a democracy. And when you're hitting 70% of the people saying they want something and the legislature is not, I think now it's incumbent upon the legislature to go out and explain to the people why they're not going to do it. And so, on the other hand, maybe people will start voting in this upcoming legislative election, given what Tim said, that there seems to be even stronger views than even the past couple of years.
Certainly a possibility. The House has passed a bill. It got no traction in the Senate. So it's a lot of politics going on. People are going to be running for governor, so it gets a little crazy.
Gotcha. Okay, now where do Kansans stand on Medicaid expansion? Let's take a look. 69.6% of people supported expanding Medicaid in Kansas. 9% disagreed. As they decided who got their vote to represent them in the Kansas legislature, 49% of people think Medicaid expansion is highly or extremely important, and 64.4% of people agreed that expanding Medicaid would help rural Kansas hospitals remain in business. Now, Tim, Medicaid expansion is an issue that never seems to get to the floor at the State House, at least in recent years. So could things change next year?
The advocates of it hope so. Governor Kelly is going to introduce her sixth proposal to expand Medicaid. The legislative leadership has said no. But, you know, deals can be made, so that's a possibility. There's one element in this survey that I thought was really fascinating. When you looked at the partisan flavor of this, 86% of Democrats like Medicaid expansion, 76% of independents, and 55% of Republicans. A majority of Republicans surveyed want Medicaid expansion. To Bob's point, the public have said it out loud. We want this. And the resistance to it is going to have a harder and harder time defending their position.
And the way you phrased your question was interesting because you said, will this get to the floor? And that's the key, because the Republican leadership in the last few years has just said, no, this is not going to the floor. They do not want to see a vote, because it's possible, I don't know if Tim agrees, that if there was just a straight up vote in the Kansas legislature on this issue, that Medicaid expansion might pass, right?
I think if the members of the legislature put blinders on and didn't have any kind of influences from special interest or the leadership, it would pass in a landslide.
All right, moving on to housing and education. Here are some stats I found interesting. Now, on housing, we got feedback on homeless issues in Kansas. 48.5% of respondents believed more government spending is needed in their community on services for the homeless. 23.2% did not agree with more spending on this issue. Now, we also got feedback on the quality of people's housing. For people who were not satisfied with the quality of their housing, financial factors, housing costs, and housing availability were the most often mentioned reasons preventing them from moving. Now, on education, 74.6% of respondents felt comfortable supporting K-12 public schools with their tax dollars. Support is lower for higher education levels. Now it's 67.7% for Kansas technical or vocational schools, 62.7% for community colleges, and 52.4% for 6 Kansas state governed universities. Tim, let's start with you. What's your take on the education stats, and how do these results compare to previous years?
Well, I think they're relatively consistent with previous years. I would say the 75% number in terms of funding K-12 public schools makes a lot of sense, since it's a constitutional mandate. The Kansas Constitution requires this to be done. We've had a lot of litigation about that. I'm kind of interested in the declining support for education funding as you go through the education process. Yeah. So it's really strong in K-12. Everybody goes. Then the fewer people go to tech school or community college, the number drops. And you get to the universities, it drops even more. And specifically for Washburn University in Topeka, it craters. And so I think it has something to do with people's loyalty to the institutions they may or may not have gone to.
And now let's go to Bob. When it comes to housing, lack of affordable housing seems to be a big issue for some of the people that took this survey. Homelessness is also a growing issue in major cities in the state. What's your take on the results that we mentioned? Well,
a quick thought on housing. When you think about, we mentioned COVID earlier. COVID and when COVID was ending, the now famous supply chain issues, and building a house was almost impossible. It was taking years and nobody could get any materials. And COVID's over, and what are people hit up with? The Fed raising interest rates. So I think people interested in getting a house or even renting are very frustrated, because I think Tim alluded to this earlier in the program. There was this idea that when COVID was over, maybe it was just a fantasy, right? Oh, things were going to be so good. We made it through COVID, and many of us actually got COVID. Hey, and all of a sudden, okay, inflation, I can't rent an apartment, or I can't buy a house. I think we're seeing that in the results of this poll, and maybe people will support government being involved, but that could involve raising taxes, and I'm a little dubious about that.
Bob, Tim, thank you both. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Can you insure our lemonade stand?
Would you still insure our lemonade stand?
Yes. For auto, home, business, farm, and life insurance, give our offices a call today. We appreciate your business.
The 27 News Storm Tracker is sponsored by D.L. Smith Electric, bringing your vision to life.
Because McCright Plaza has been family-owned and operated since 1975, we are able to make decisions that keep you independent and in the game.
Get a game plan and join the winning team at McCright Plaza.
As Americans, we enjoy many freedoms.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of good beer. Not all beers fulfill the lofty expectations on which our founding fathers built this country. As Americans, we remain free to drink any beer we choose. The Blind Tiger Brewery urges you to come in and try one of the principles that keeps us free. Blind Tiger Beer, simply American. This is Jay with the Blind Tiger Brewery, and I approve all craft beer, especially ours.
Every morning, it's a brand new day. Your wake-up call to a fresh start. And 27 News is working for you to bring you breaking news from overnight, a forecast to help you plan your day, and information that can help make your day easier. We keep you updated on weather conditions for when you're heading out the door and when you're heading home. Whatever your morning routine, we're working to bring you all the local news you need. 27 News, working for you.
No mo FOMO, no more fear of missing out. The Topeka Symphony Orchestra presents Space Explorer. Get off your couch and experience the Topeka Symphony on November 4th at White Concert Hall.
The 27 News Storm Tracker is sponsored by D.L. Smith Electric, bringing your vision to life.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're digging into what Kansans think about the biggest political issues in Kansas. Now, Bob Tim, the Kansas Speaks survey for 2023 also includes feedback on other major issues like immigration, water conservation efforts. Tim, what's one key takeaway for you that was not mentioned?
There is a stat in here that is very troubling. It says 20% of Kansans surveyed believe they'll be living in another state in 5 years. That's up from 16% last year and 13%. If we have young people moving away, where's the workforce?
Bob?
Yeah, you know, we talked a lot about abortion the last couple of years, but still, you know, I've lived in Kansas over 20 years, and Kansas had this reputation as this firm anti-abortion state. But when you look at this survey, 66% of Kansans in this survey said if there was an abortion ban, they would not report on someone who went out of state or got one illegally. Almost 70% saying, hey, we wouldn't tattle or tell on someone who's technically breaking law if there's a ban, which then makes you wonder how effective a ban could be.
All right, Bob, Tim, thank you. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at InKansasPolitics and on Facebook. Just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News. And check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you here same time, same place. Have a good day.